Welcome guys to my YouTube channel Make in NCRT. So today we are going to study chapter 8 of class 6 history NCRT book. The name of the chapter is Villages, Towns and Trade. So at the start of the chapter we see the story of Prabhakar at the blacksmith shop. So this story is basically Prabhakar is he went to the blacksmith shop, and when he saw the different tools and that were made and how they were made, he was quite amazed. He saw axes and sickles that were made there and they were ready for sale. He was also noticed that the temperature inside the workshop was quite hot and it was quite noisy. So all these things intrigued and amazed Prabhakar a lot. So in this chapter we will see about in the following part we will learn about the different iron tools that were used for agriculture during the Mahajanpad period. So we see that the use of iron began in the subcontinent around 3000 years ago, and some of the largest collection of iron tools and weapons were found in megalithic burials. So we see that around 3000 years ago, the use of iron started in the subcontinent, and before that, copper was the main metal that was used. And also, among the collections of iron tools that we have recovered from the past times, the majority of these iron tools have been found in megalithic burials. So megalithic burials, as we have read in the previous chapter, these were pit burials or that were marked by large stone boulders. These boulders were kept on top of the burial site, and these were known as megaliths. So these kind of burials were called as megalithic burials, and from these burials a large amount of iron tools that was used during those times have been recovered. So around 2500 years ago, there is evidence for the growing use of iron tools. So we see that around these times, the growth of iron tools increased, and there is a shift from the use of bronze and copper, all these tools, to the use of iron tools. The axes for clearing forest and iron plowshares. Now, among the new iron tools that were widely used, the main two tools were the iron axes. These were used to clear forest, and the iron plowshares. So, as we have read in the previous chapter, after the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization, and when we see that the new settlers, whom we often call as the Indo-Aryan settlers, and these people who came and settled in the northern regions of India near the Punjab region, they started to move gradually towards the east. And as they went towards the east, they saw that the soil over there was quite sticky and clayey in nature, and the region was also very densely forested. Now, to settle in these eastern lands, they needed to clear the forest. So we see that the increased use of iron axes, and for agriculture, and to plow the land that was quite sticky, they needed better plows. So the use of iron plowshare also increased to so as to increase agriculture in these eastern lands. So next we see uh, in the right side of this page you can see the pictures of iron tools. So at the top, this is the tong, iron tong, and this is the top view, we can say, of a iron axe, that is the axe head. And below this we have the iron sickle. This tool was used for mainly cutting the crops when they had ripe, and clearing bushes and so on. And we see the iron axe that was used for clearing forest. So these are the different types of iron tools. Other steps to increase production, that is irrigation. So the kings and kingdoms that you have been reading about could not have existed without the support of the flourishing villages. So we see that, all as we have read in the previous chapter, there was a development of many sort of medium-sized kingdoms and few large kingdoms in this time. These were called the Janpads and the Mahajanpads. And so all these were based around a central capital city. And to sustain the population of the capital city, you needed agriculture, as agriculture was the primary source of income as well as subsistence during this time. And so we see that these large kingdoms, they dependent on a large extent to the growth of the villages. So we see that and to increase the growth of the villages, the growth of agriculture was mainly important. So we see that the system of transplantation, that is taking a small sapling and directly planting it in the ground instead of just throwing seeds in the fields for agriculture, that way the survival rates of the plant increases and we have a greater agricultural production. So the system of transplantation was used, and to increase the agricultural production, irrigation was also started. Also, the we see the use of iron plowshare to better plow the sticky lands and clay soil. And for the system of irrigation, we see that several canals, wells, and tanks and artificial lakes were also built by the rulers during this time. So the rulers, they built all these irrigation works to in a way to increase the agricultural production, and so that ultimately the revenue that they get from the farmers at taxes would also increase or at least be maintained. And it was also beneficial for the farmers that their source of agricultural production gets more stable, and it becomes less prone to famines and droughts. So let's continue. If you look at the chart, you will find that some of the stages in the construction of irrigation works are mentioned. Fill in the rest by using the following phrases. So I have done this previously. This is basically the whole process of building an irrigation work, and why would a king need to build an irrigation work in the first place. So the process has been given here. The steps in this whole process are given in these boxes, and some of the steps we can see are missing. So we have to fill in from these options that are given in the correct box. So let us see. The king needs money for armies, palaces, and forts. So we have read in the previous chapter that during the Mahajanpad era, the kings were building a lot of walled cities. They were building forts, and also they were recruiting larger armies, and all these needed a lot of money to sustain. So to generate the money, they had to demand taxes from the farmers, and then the farmers have also to increase the production to pay the taxes. So we see that this point will go in the box number 3. So the farmers had also to increase their production of agriculture so that they can pay the increased tax. Now after this, so to increase this agriculture, you need better irrigation works. So this is only possible with irrigation. So there is a need of constructing better irrigation so as to increase the agricultural production. And for this, the king usually provided the money and planned the irrigation works, so that he guided the farmers and he provided the money for to them to build the irrigation work. And then the farmers and the common people themselves had to provide the labor to actually build the irrigation works. Now the money comes from the rulers, and the actual laborers, it comes from the common people and the farmers. And after that, naturally, as we see that as these irrigation works are getting built, the production also increases. And as the production increases, so does the revenue, that is the amount of tax that a ruler can collect from his peasants. So as the revenue increases, so this in turn also benefits the farmers because crop production is more certain. This part is quite important. So generally the whole cycle would end at point 8, but this point is, if we see in the long run, that point number 9, that is farmers are also benefited because crop production is more certain. It helps to maintain the amount of crop that is produced, and it better protects the crops during droughts, and suppose there is any natural calamities and those sorts of other disasters. So this also benefits the farmers. So next, let's continue. Who lived in the villages? There were at least three different kinds of people living in most villages in southern and northern parts of the subcontinent. In the Tamil region, large landowners were known as Velalar, ordinary plowmen were known as Usavar, and landless laborers, including slaves, were known as Kadaisiar and Adimai. So we see that in the villages there were broadly three types of people who used to live. One is the large landowners. These people owned large tracts of land, agricultural land. And next are the ordinary plowmen. So these people are generally small farmers who used to work on their own fields. And the third is the landless laborers or the slaves. Now these people were known as the Kadaisiyar or the Adimai. These people basically worked on the lands of the big landowners and did other menial jobs as slaves. So we see that this is basically the broad divisions of the village society. Now these kind of similar divisions were found in the northern region also. Now the terms that we have studied over here, these are specific to the Tamil region, that is in the southern part of India. In the Tamil region, the large landowners were known as the Villalars, ordinary plowmen were called Uzavar, and the landless laborer were known as Kadaisiyar and Adimai. And if we go to the northern part of the country, the village headman was known as the Gram Bhojaka. Usually men from the same family held the positions for generations. So we see that the position of Gram Bhojaka, it was a hereditary position, that if father is Gram Bhojaka, then after that his son will become the Gram Bhojaka or the village headman. So Gram Bhojaka is basically, if we translate this to English, it would basically mean that a person who sustains the villages, that is a sort of a village headman. So next we see that in other words the post was hereditary. So as we read in the previous line, the Gram Bhojaka was often the largest landowner. So this is quite important, that generally the person who usually was the most powerful or had the most land in the village was usually uh, elected by the elected, or it depended upon village to villages. He was generally regarded as the Gram Bhojaka or the village headman. And in during those times, the land was basically the agricultural land. It was a symbol of power. So the amount of land one owned, it uh, symbolized the position of that person in the society. So the Gram Bhojaka was often the largest landowner. Generally, he had slaves and hired workers to cultivate the land. Besides, as he was powerful, the king often used him to collect taxes from the villages. He also functioned as the judge and sometimes as the policeman. So we see that the Gram Bhojaka, as he had large area of land under his control, so he used the slaves and the landless laborers to work on his fields. Now, the Gram Bhojaka himself did not did the agricultural manual laborer of agricultural work. He hired these people to work on the fields and plant the crops and maintain the agricultural works and so on. And as he was the most powerful person in the village, now this Gram Bhojaka was used by the king to collect the taxes. So he was a sort of a representative of the king in the village level. So this person was also used by the king to collect taxes. He used to collect taxes from the villagers and give it to the king directly or through any minister. Then we also see the other functions that the Gram Bhojaka played was that of a judge or sometimes of a policeman. So if there is any crime or any dispute arises in the village, so the Gram Bhojaka acted as a judge and a policeman to sort out these disturbances that were taking place in the villages. Apart from Gram Bhojaka, there were other independent farmers known as Grihapatis, most of whom were smaller landowners. So other than the Gram Bhojaka, who was the largest landowner, the other farmers and landowners in the villages were known as Grihapatis. And then there were men and women such as Dasa Karmakara who did not own any land. So we see that these were the landless laborers and slaves. These were known as the Dasa Karmakaras and had to earn a living by working on the fields of others, fields owned by others. So as we saw that these dasas, the Dasa Karmakaras, they used to work on the fields of large landowners, and in this way they used to earn a living for themselves. In most villages, there were also some craftsperson, such as the blacksmiths, the potter, and the carpenter, the weaver. So, other than the agricultural farmers, these villages also contained other craftsperson. Now, these people made things that were necessary in daily life, such as the blacksmith. He used to make different tools that were mainly used in agriculture and other purposes. And potter was there who used to make all the different kinds of pottery, such as the bowls, mud bowls, and different types of containers were made to store different items such as agricultural grains and so on. And then there was the carpenter and weaver. So the carpenter basically made things out of wood, such as houses and palaces. And in case, of course, palaces were not that common in villages, but mainly the carpenter in the village made the housing of the villages. And then there was the weaver. This guy used to make the clothing that was worn by the people, and also different we can say the baskets made of let's say plant material, that are fibers, plant fibers, and animal hides and so on. And different cotton items were also made by the weavers. So in the next part, that is the earliest Tamil composition, in this blue box we see about the earliest works in Tamil are known as the Sangam literature. These were composed around 2300 years ago. So these texts are called as the Sangam because they were supposed to have been composed and compiled in assemblies known as Sangamas of poets that were held in the city of Madurai. The Tamil terms mentioned above are found in the Sangam literature. So, if we look at South India, then we come across the Sangam literatures. Now, these Sangam literatures are basically secular in nature. These talks about different kings and rulers of those times, the life of the different kings and how to rule and so on, and different other kinds of stories are also there. And these Sangam literatures are known as Sangam because these were written and compiled by a assembly of poets and writers and poets. This assembly, it used to meet in the city of Madurai. Madurai is a city in southern India, and in this city of Madurai, this assembly that met was known as Sangamas. So the literature that was composed in these assemblies was known as Sangam literature. And also one thing that these Sangams were held during the I think Madurai was the capital of the Pandya kingdom in southern India. If you look at the Sangam age. So this time is also known as the Sangam age in the history of southern India. There were three kingdoms: the Pandyas, Cheras, and Cholas. So these Pandyas, their capital city was the Madurai. So in this city, all these Sangams were held. So let's go to the next part. Coins. Archaeologists have found several thousands of coins belonging to this period. The earliest coins which were in use for about 500 years were punch mark coins. So we see that the one shown here. So if we look at the picture on the right, that is these are the punched mark coins. So after a sheet of metal has been cut and made of the shape that is required, you see a round, sort of round shape over here, and then it is stamped by a different, by sort of a stamp or a punch mark. That is, the mark usually contains a symbol of god or goddesses, or a symbol of royalty, or the symbol of the kingdom that issued the coins. So these kinds of coins were used for a long time. These were quite simple to make, and they were used for around 500 years. Next, in the blue box, if we read about the punch mark coins, the punch mark coins were generally rectangular or sometimes square or round in shape. So in the picture we saw that this is a sort of round shape, and either cut out of metal sheets or made out of flattened metal globules, small spherical body. So we see that these punch mark coins, these were, as I told you, these were hammered in the shape that was required from cutting the large metal sheets, thin metal sheets, and then also these were hammered by from small round pieces of metal. These were hammered to the shape that was required, and the punch mark coin was made from them. The coins were not inscribed but were stamped with symbols using dies or punches. Hence, these are called the punch mark coins. These coins are found in most part of the subcontinent and remained in circulation till early century CE. So we see that after the shape is made, then the stamp or a die is placed hard on the surface of the coin, so that the symbol is inscribed on the metal surface. So this is how a punch mark coin is made. And as we see that because these are punched, the metal surface is punched with a stamp. So so naturally these coins that are thus made are known as the punched mark coins. And regarding their use, we can see that these were in use till the early century CE. So we can see that they were used for a very long time. Then in this box it talks about the other means of exchange. Read this short poem from Sangama collection. As they carried the white paddy of their land to exchange it for the salt of another, crossing the long roads in the carts through the sands white as moonlight, taking whole families who hate to be left behind. The departure of salt merchants leave the city empty. Salt was produced plentifully along the sea coast. What are the merchants planning to exchange it with, and how are they traveling? So if we read this small story that is given here, it is a story from one of the Sangam literatures. It talks about the salt merchants and how they travel from one place to another to sell the salt. So we see that in the coastal areas. So if we look at the question that is given over here, what are the merchants planning to exchange it with? That is, if you have read about the barter system. So if a person is producing a good and he needs another type of good, then he would go to a person who has that good, and he would exchange his material with the good that he needs from the other person. So both would benefit from this. But And in this case, that we see that perhaps the salt merchant, he needs, let's say, food for for survival. He would go to a farmer and give him his salt, and in return he would get the food and agricultural grains. So this type of exchange system is known as a barter system. And but let's see the other question first. How were they traveling? So if we read the story, we can see crossing the roads in their carts. So we can see that the merchant used to travel through using different types of carts. These were drawn by animals, mainly bullocks and cattle. So this is how they traveled. And one thing about the barter system is that it is a problem of the barter system, that is the double coincidence of demand, because it means that if I have something and I want, let's say I have iron tools, and I want I want agricultural produce. So I have to find a person who would also want to take my iron tools and give me agricultural produce in return, grains in return. So that is the problem, that you unless and until the both parties agreed to exchange their goods, the transaction cannot take place. So unless I find a person who needs agricultural goods, who needs iron tools, and is willing to sell his agricultural produce to me, so I can't exchange my iron tools with him. Suppose if a person I found, he has agricultural produce, but he does not require iron tools, so how would he exchange with me? So that is a problem that arises with the barter system. So because of this, we see the use of coins, it generally came forward, that I sell my good for coins or currency, and then I exchange that currency for the thing that I want. So I no longer depend upon finding a person who also needs my produce, and to see whether he has the produce that I need. So the dependence on the demand and want, it vanished due to the introduction of coinage. Next we see about cities with many functions. Very often a single town was important for a variety of reasons. Let us look at the example of Mathura. So if we see, let us go to page map 7. Okay, it's not in this chapter, we will see later. So Mathura has been an important settlement for more than 2,500 years. It was important because it was located at the crossroads of two major routes of travel and trade, from the northwest to the east and from the north to the south. There were fortifications around the city and several shrines. Farmers and herders from adjoining areas provided food to the people in the city. Mathura was also a center where some extremely fine sculpture was produced. So we read about the city of Mathura, that it was an important center for trade and travel, because it was located at the crossroads of two important routes. As we have read about the Dakshin Patha and the road with goes from north to south, and the Uttara Patha, that is from east to west. All these roads were met and passed through Mathura. So we see that it sat on the crossroad of these important routes for trade and commerce, and for where people used to frequently travel. And we see that there was fortifications around the city of Mathura, and there were also many shrines that was present. So even today you see Mathura is an important religious city. There are a lot of Krishna and Radha Krishna temples are located at Mathura. So we see that the people of Mathura, they depended for their survival on the farmers and the herders from the adjoining area of the city, who provided them with food and materials, the other materials that were needed for subsistence. Mathura was also a center for some extremely fine sculpture. So we see that Mathura was the home of the Mathura school of sculpture. That we see, if we when we will read about sculptures, we will find that there were around three main schools. One was the Gandhara school, other was the Mathura, and there was another third one. I will look it up later. But these were very important for different kinds of sculpture. Very intricate and fine sculpture was made over here. If you look at some of the pictures of Mathura School of Architecture, there is this famous sculpture of the King Kanishk, the Kushan ruler King Kanishk. It was also from the Mathura School of Architecture. So it is there in the museum. It is half broken. It belongs to the Mathura School of Architecture. That is the sculpture of King Kanishk. And then around 2000 years ago, Mathura became the second capital of the Kushanas, about whom you will read. Mathura was also a religious center. There were Buddhist monasteries, Jain shrines, and it was important center for the worship of Krishna. So as we just read, the sculpture of King Kanishka was of the Mathura school of architecture, and the Kanishk, he belonged to the Kushan Empire. He was the most important ruler of the Kushan Empire. So it became the Mathura became the second capital of the Kushan Empire. So we can see the importance of the city of Mathura from this statement. And also, as we have read, that Mathura was also a religious center. There were several Buddhist, Jain, and it was important center for Krishna, Radha Krishna temples and Krishna worship. Several inscriptions on surface such as stone slabs and statues have been found in Mathura. Generally, these are short inscriptions recording gifts made by them, by men and sometimes women, to the monasteries and shrines. They were made by kings and queens, officers, merchants, and craftspersons who lived in the city. For instance, inscriptions from Mathura mention goldsmith, blacksmith, weavers, basket makers, garland makers, perfumers. So we see that as we see that due to Mathura being such an important and old city, several inscriptions that are inscribed on stone slabs and walls of shrines have been found, and from statues. So these generally record the dates on when the inscription was made, and generally record the grants and donations that were given to the different religious monasteries and temples that were throughout the city. And some of the inscription also mentions about the different types of craftsperson who used to live in the city, such as goldsmith, blacksmith, weavers, basket makers, garland makers, perfumers, etc. And majority of these donations to the religious sites that we see in these inscriptions were done by the rich kings and queens, the officers and big merchants and large craftspersons and so on. So let's see this. Make a list of occupations of people who lived in the city, lived in Mathura. List one occupation that was not practiced in the Harappan cities. If we just read the previous paragraph, we come across several craftsperson who used to live in the city of Mathura. As we saw that goldsmiths, weavers, basket makers, garlands, perfumers, all these peoples, they lived in the city. There were, as you read that it was a religious city, so there is bound to be several monks and priests who used to live in the city. And as it was also the second capital of the Kushanas, so important administrative officers, kings, and palace workers, slaves. These people also lived in the city, and if we look at for in the adjoining areas, there were obviously the agriculturalists and the herders and the hunter gatherers in the forest. So these people who lived inside the city and some lived nearby the city, these were also related to the city. So if we note that the people who were not mentioned during the Harappan cities, these people were would probably be, um, I guess it would be the perfume makers, because in the Harappan cities we have agriculturalists, goldsmiths were obviously there, as gold was used during that time. Blacksmith was also there, as copper, bronze were also used. Basket makers were there, weavers were there. Cotton was first used during the Indus Valley civilization. So garland makers were also there, and I guess perfumers, you could say, is the new thing that was there in Mathura, but not there in the Harappan cities. You can look this up on your own, search on the internet and Google and make a detailed list. So if you feel that I may be wrong, or if there are other professions that did not exist during the Harappan times, you can write those in the comments. So let's go to the next part, crafts and craftsperson. We have archaeological evidence for crafts, and these include extremely fine pottery known as the Northern Black Polished Ware, NBPW. So this type of pottery is quite important, and it is often asked in different exams, that it is a extremely fine pottery known as the Northern Black Polished Ware. It gets its name from the fact that it is generally found in the northern part of the subcontinent. Remember that archaeological evidence for many crafts may not have survived. We know from texts that manufacture of cloth was important. There were famous centers such as Varanasi in the north, Madurai in the south. Both men and women work in these centers. So we see that for regarding the different crafts that existed during these times, we get physical evidence such as these northern black polished ware. These were mainly found in the northern part of the country, as the name suggests, and in other than such pottery, we see that there are also the evidence of weavers, that is cloth manufacture. This was also a quite important industry during this time. The important centers of cloth manufacture was Varanasi in northern India and Madurai in southern India. And in this industry, both men and women, both of them worked in to manufacture cloth. And one thing is that there could have been other such important industries, but due to, in some cases, the end product, it may be biodegradable, or as it does not survive for a very long time, it naturally gets decayed. So we do not have any evidence or large scale evidence of these crafts and industries that were there. So we can read about these from the ancient literature and texts where these industries are mentioned. So we see that the cloth from those times have mainly not survived due to them being the cloth being a biodegradable material. So we learn about the cloth manufacture industry from the different texts that have survived from those times. Also, let us learn about the northern black polished ware in detail in this blue box. The NBPW is a hard wheel made metallic looking ware with a shiny black surface. So we see that, as the name suggests, it is black. Uh, in It looks black, it's in color, and because it has a shiny metallic looking surface, it is wheel made. So the potter's wheel that we was an important invention. So it was made using the wheel, and it was quite, the surface of these ware was quite shiny and metallic looking. The potter was used to expose the earthenware to a very high temperature in his kiln, which resulted in the blackening of its outer surface. A fine black slip was also applied on which gave a pottery a mirror-like shine. So we see the reason behind this, metallic looking black shiny surface was because when they were made, the potter used to heat these earthenware inside inside a furnace and to a very high temperature. So the mud that was used, it got black in color, and also fine paste was applied on its surface that gave it a mirror-like shine. That is that we see the metallic sort of shine that it gets because black slip is applied on its surface. Then we come across the rules for spinning and weaving. These rules are from the Arthashastra mentioned in chapter 7. So as we read before, the Arthashastra, it was a book by Kautilya or Chanakya. Kautilya was the prime minister of Chandragupta Maurya. So he wrote this book Arthashastra. It deals mainly about how to rule and different aspects of kingship and governance. So in this book there are rules regarding spinning and weaving. They describe how spinning and weaving could be done in a workshop under the supervision of a special official. So we see that it describes that the work in a spinning workshop or a weaving workshop has to be carried out under the supervision of a special official. Widows, young women who were differently abled, nuns and mothers of courtesans, retired women servants of king, women who had retired from the service in temples may be used for processing wool, bark, cotton, hemp and flax. So we see that this part describes the workers who could be engaged in the spinning and weaving industry. So these were mainly women, different, old age women who had retired from their activities, or women who were differently able could be used for these weaving and spinning industries. So they should be paid according to the quality and quantity of work. So it describes the payment system also of these workers, that it depended upon the quality and the amount of work they did. Women who are not permitted to leave their homes can send maid servants to bring raw materials from the superintendent and take the finished work back to him. So it also mentions, as you see, this is like a sort of work from home that we see nowadays, that earlier days women were not allowed to leave their homes. So it says that they could send a maid servant to the workshop, where the maid servant would collect the raw materials from the superintendent who was there, and then she would take it back to the home of the main woman, and there at a home she would make it and make the final finished product, and at the end stage the finished product would be transported back to the superintendent and to the workshop. So in this way we can see that the women who were not allowed to leave their homes could also work. So women who can visit the workshop should go at dawn and give their work and receive their wages. There should be enough light to examine the work. In case the superintendent looks at the woman or talks about anything other than the work, he should be punished. If a woman does not complete her work, she will have to pay a fine, and her thumbs can be cut off. So we see that there are rules such as when the worker has to go to work in the morning and then receive the wages accordingly. And it also mentions that there should be sufficient lighting inside the workshop so that the work could be examined, and also says that if in case the superintendent, if he is male and he looks at the women who are working in the workshop in a bad way, or you talks about something that is not related to the work, that person could be punished. So we see that the rules mentioned in the Arthashastra, these covered a wide range of aspects and are not limited to just regarding the production of the industrial production, but also worker safety and women safety are also included in these rules. And then we see that if a worker or a woman does not do her job properly, then she might have to pay a fine, and in some extreme cases her thumbs may also be cut off. So we see that punishments for not doing the work properly are also mentioned. So basically, from reading all these rules, we get an idea that the Earth Shastra, how much detail, do you know, information is contained in the Earth Shastra, and how many facets of work and dimensions of in the work life are considered in the Earth Shastra. So this highlights the, you know, the importance of Arthashastra as a, you know, as a document for, you know, statesmanship and governance. And also, you know, it gives us an idea of that these kinds of different rules that we see are being slowly implemented in present day, that is the worker protection and the different rules in the workplaces, women's rights and women's protection in the workplace and so on. These were also considered during those times. So we can find about the, you know, the setup of the of an industry or the society as such from these the text resources from the ancient times. So let's see the question that is given here. Make a list of all women who could be employed by the superintendent. Do you think women would have faced any problems while working? So from this story you can find the list of women that is given over here in this part, who could be employed in the work by the superintendent. And do you think women could have faced any problems while working? So in this part we saw that you know, some women were not permitted to leave their homes. You know, there could be incidences of, you know, harassment of a woman in the workplace and so on. You know, also during pregnancy a woman might find it difficult to work. So these are the problems that a woman during those times had to face, and also in today's time also we see that these problems are there, and the government is making different rules so as to, you know, address these kinds of problems that women face. So let's continue. Many craftspersons and merchants now formed associations known as Shrenis. These Shrenis were of craftspersons provided training, produced raw materials, and distributed the finished products. So we see that as the number of craftspersons and industries grew, so these craftspersons, they formed associations or groups. You know, these groups were known as the Shrenis, and these Shrenis, they gave training to new recruits or new you know, craftspersons, and they used to produce, you know, provide the raw materials to the craftsmen. And also, you know, they were responsible for the sale and distribution of the finished product that was produced by these craftsmen. And then we see these Shrenis of merchants organize the trade. So we see that the sale of the finished products was organized by the Shrenis. Shrenis also served as banks where rich men and women deposited money. This was invested, and part of the interest was returned or used to support religious institutions such as monasteries. So we see that other than supporting and organizing the craftsmen, these Shrenis also acted as a bank where the rich people used to deposit their money. And these were, you know, large Shrenis were quite a safe place to keep the money, you know, as the chance of defaulting or, you know, these Shrenis failing was quite less. And sometimes the interest that was generated from the money that was deposited, it was used for you know, supporting different religious institutions, or the, you know, monks and shramanas who used to go to different houses to beg for food. These money was used to support them and build them, you know, viharas and places for them to stay and so on. A closer look at Arikamedu. So Arikamedu, it's a town in southern India. It's near Pondicherry. Between 2200 years ago and 1900 years ago, Arikamedu was a coastal settlement where ships unloaded goods from distant land. So it was a major trading port during those times, and here traders from different regions, from faraway regions, came to trade. A massive brick structure, which may have been a warehouse, have been found at this city. So we see the remains of a warehouse have been found at Arikamedu. Other finds include pottery from Mediterranean region, such as amphore, a tall double-handed jar that contained liquid such as wine or oil, and stamped red glazed pottery known as Aretine ware, which were named after a city in Italy. These were made by pressing wet clay into a stamped mold. So there were yet another kind of pottery which was found locally, though Roman designs were used. Roman lamps, glassware, and gems have also been found at this site. So we see that this site is quite important because it had trade links with the Mediterranean region. So people from such a faraway region also came to trade in India, and Arikamedu was an important site. So over here we see that an amphore, that is it foray that is it is a sort of a tall jar with two handles on both side of it. A tall this was usually used to contain wines and other liquids. This type of jars have been found, and a type of pottery known as the Aretine ware. These were pressed wet clay into a stamped mold, and this is how they were made. And this Aretine ware is named after a city where they were made, and this city is located in Italy. And also we see that Roman pottery and Roman glassware, lamps, and gems were also found at this site. So this suggests that Arikamedu had trade links with the Roman Empire. So we see traders from the Roman Empire came and sold their wares and goods in Arikamedu, and also Indian wares and goods have been found in Italy. That suggests that trade went both sides. So there is, I think, a small statue of goddess Lakshmi or Saraswati that was found in a city in Italy. It's quite famous, the name of the city. There was a big volcanic eruption that took place over there. I don't exactly remember the name right now. You can look it up. It was a small statue that was found. So all these indicates that the trade links between India and the Roman Empire were there during these times. Brahmi and Tamil inscriptions. Several pieces of pottery have inscription in Brahmi, which were used to write Tamil. So we see that these are fragments of pottery, and on them, if we notice that Tamil is written using the Brahmi script. So Brahmi script was used to write the Indian languages, and in this case, Tamil has been written on the surface of the pottery using the Brahmi script. Small tanks have been found that were probably dyeing vats used to dye clothes. There is plenty of evidence for making of beads from semi-precious stones and glass. So we see that Arikamedu also has evidence of dyeing vats where different dye clothes were dyed to different colors, and also there is evidence of bead making from semi-precious stones and glass making also. Then we see list the evidence that indicates that there was a contact with the Roman Empire. So as we have read, the trade of all these amphore jars and Aretine ware and Roman glassware, gems, and all these that were found in Arikamedu, and also the Indian wares that were found in the different cities of Rome and Greece. So these indicate that there was trade links between India and the Roman Empire. So next we see an account by a Greek sailor, the story of Berigaza, the Greek name of Bharoch. So we see that the city of Bharoch was known during that time. That is, the Greek name of Bharuch was Badigaza. So the Bharuch, if we look at the Indian map, it is located near the in the state of Gujarat, that is near the Gulf of Khambat. The city is located near the Gulf of Khambat. So from there, Greek traders used to come from, Greece and the other colonies in Middle East. So they used to trade with the Greek traders over there. And here we can see an account of a Greek sailor. The Gulf is very narrow at Badigaza and very hard to navigate for those coming from the sea. Ships had to steer in very skillfully, and experienced local fishermen who were employed by the king. The imports into Barigaza are wine, copper, tin, lead, coral, topaz, cloth, gold and silver coins. The exports from the town includes plants from the Himalayas, ivory, agate, carnelian, cotton, silk and perfumes. Special gifts were brought by merchants for the king. These included vessels of silver, singing boys, beautiful women, fine wines and fine clothes. So we see that the different kinds of trade that took place in the city of Badigaza, the imports included wine, copper, tin, all these things, and gold and silver coin. And from Badigaza we see different plants from the Himalayas, including medicinal plants, ivory, that is cotton garments, silks and perfumes, carnelian beads. All these were exported from the town of Barigaza. And the merchants who came to trade in this town also brought gifts that were meant for the king of this town. And the gifts included vessels of silver, singing boys and beautiful women, and fine wines and fine clothes. So we see that during those times, people were also, as slaves, were also exchanged as gifts between rulers and merchants. So let's see. Make a list of all the things important and exported from Barigaza. Underline at least two things that are not used during the Harappan times. But why do you think merchants brought gifts for the kings? So from here we can see, we can make all the list of all the things that were imported and exported. And then if we look at the next part, that is list two things that were not in use during the Harappan times. These would be probably wine would be one thing. Wine was not, I think, used during the Harappan times. And I think wine and silk and perfumes, these things were not in use during the Harappan times, because copper was there, tin was there, lead. I think lead was also there. Coral and topaz were used. Gold and silver coins were used, but perfumes and wines were not there during Harappan times. So you can look this up yourself, and make adjustment to it as you find out in the internet on, or look up any other book you if you want. If Why do you think the merchants brought gifts for the king? So as we read that the main reason why the merchants they brought gift for the king was because it was a way to please the king, and to seek permission by the merchants to trade in the city. He had to present something to the king, and in return the king gave the permission to the merchants that yes, you can trade in this city and you can trade in my lands, and you don't have to worry for your protection. So this was mainly the reason why the merchants brought gifts for the king. And also this was sometimes sponsored by the rulers who sent the merchants to establish diplomatic ties and have better relation with a particular ruler. Then we see traders and trade and traders. You have read about northern black polished ware. This fine pottery, especially bowls and plates, were found from several archaeological sites throughout the continent. How do you think it reached these places? Traders may have carried them from place to place, from the place they were made to sell them at other places. So as we read about the northern black polished ware, these were mainly made in the northern regions of the country. But evidence of these type of pottery have been found throughout the Indian subcontinent, and the main reason why it could be found throughout the Indian subcontinent, because of trade. That is, the traders who were originally from the northern India, let's say they took these northern ware to southern India and sold them, and then we could find evidence of northern black polished ware in southern India also. So through trade we see different kinds of goods and wares traveling from one place to another. South India was famous for gold, spices, especially paper and precious stones. Paper, it was known as black gold. It was that precious during those times that it was known as black gold. I think paper was called black gold. Then there was gold and other spices also. So as you see, it is written here that paper was particularly valued in the Roman Empire, so much so that it was known as black gold. So as I that just told you, that the paper was highly prized by the Roman Empire and it came to be known as black gold. So traders carry many of these goods to Rome in ships across the sea and in land caravans. There must have been quite a lot of trade, as many Roman gold coins have been found in southern India. So we see that the Indo-Roman trade was quite prevalent during this time. Mainly Roman gold coins have been found in southern India, and Roman traders used to come in India via the sea or via the land route, and they used to take the valuables such as gold, spices, silk, cotton, clothes, and so on, pepper, and all these were they purchased with the help of their gold coins. And so we see that a lot of gold coins have been found in southern India. So it indicates that a lot of trade took place between southern India and the Roman Empire. There is a saying that I think one famous Roman statesman or a philosopher, he told that trade with India would lead to bankrupt Rome, because all the gold and silver was being traded with India, and all the gold and silver was going away from Rome towards India. You can look this up on the internet. Basically it indicates that the amount or the volume of trade between India and the Roman Empire was quite large. Can you think of how many and how and why these reached India? Okay, so about the gold coins, so as we read that these reached India through trade, and as these Roman traders brought Indian goods, precious, items, gemstones, and spices, and so on. They purchased these items through exchanging gold coins as a currency, and thus we find a lot of gold coins in southern India. So, a poem about trade. So, this poem is from the Sangam literature. Um, you can read this poem on your own. It basically talks about the different items that were traded during those times, different items from throughout the Indian subcontinent, how they were traded and transferred. It basically talks about these. You can read this part on your own and do this exercise that is given. Make a list of all the things that are mentioned. What would they be used for? So you can make a list of all these items and try it out yourself. So let's continue. Traders explored several sea routes. Some of these followed the coast. There were others across the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, where sailors took advantage of the monsoon winds to cross the seas more quickly. So we see that these monsoon winds were quite important for maritime trade. Now the traders who used to come via the sea, in the boats and ships, they used to take advantage of these monsoon winds that were blowing towards India, and during the monsoon times, they, with the help of the winds, they used to complete their journey in a much less time, as you know, compared to other times. So if they wanted to reach the western coast of the subcontinent from East Africa or Arabia, they chose to sail with the southwest monsoon, as and sturdy ships had to be built for these long journeys. So these monsoon winds were known as the southwest monsoon. That is, if you look at the map, that it blows from the southwest direction. That we, if we look at the map, that is, it blows sort of from towards Africa, towards the southern coast of India. So if a trader is coming from Arabia and from Mediterranean to Arabia, then he would take a ship and then follow these southwest monsoon winds, and with the help of these winds he would make the journey from Arabia to Indian coastline in a much less time. So let's see the new kingdom along the coast. Then we read about the southern half of the subcontinent is marked by long coastlines with hills, plateaus, and river valleys. Amongst these river valleys, that of the Kaveri is the most fertile. Chiefs and kings who controlled the river valleys and coast became rich and powerful. Sangam poem mentioned the Muvendar. This is a Tamil word meaning three chiefs, used for the head of the three ruling families, the Cholas, Cheras, and the Pandyas, who became powerful in southern India around 2300 years ago. So this part we see that in southern part of India, as it has a large coastline and there are also many rivers. So the kings who controlled these river valleys and the coastline, they naturally became quite rich and powerful. And in the Sangam literature, we found the names of the Movendar. So this word basically means the heads of the three ruling families of southern India. These were quite prominent and powerful kingdoms of southern India, known as the Cholas, Cheras, and Pandyas. Now these kingdoms are during the Sangam age. This time during the history of South India is known as the Sangam age, and they became powerful around 2300 years ago. So we see, then later on we see that some of these kingdoms also become more powerful and sort of establish their own empire, such as the Chola empire that we see. So during this time also, these three Cholas and Pandyas were quite rich and powerful, and each of the three chiefs had two centers of power, one inland and one on the coast. Of the six cities, two were very important: Puhar or Kaveri Pattanam, the port of the Cholas, and Madurai, the capital of the Pandyas. So we see that these three kingdoms that were there each had two capitals. One was an inland capital and other was a coastal capital. So let's suppose the coastal capital was more important for trade, and inland capital, it offered more security and better defenses. And among these six total capitals that we see of the three kingdoms, two were especially important, that is Puhar or Kaveri Pattanam. This is the port of the Cholas, that we see the coastal capital of the Cholas. And then the city of Madurai, that is the capital of the Pandya kingdom. So as we read before, that Madurai was also important because it was the center where the Sangam literature was written, where the Sangamas or the assemblies were held in the city of Madurai. So let's continue. The chief did not collect regular taxes. Instead, they demanded and received gifts from the people. So one thing that we see here, that it is quite different, that the chiefs and the rulers of these kingdoms, they did not collect any regular tax from the people. The revenue that they got was in the form of gifts from the that they received from the people. They also went on military expeditions and collected tribute from neighboring areas. And also when they invaded or carried a military expedition to the neighboring areas, they collected the tribute from that area, and in that way they gained revenue from that area. They kept some of the wealth and distributed the rest among their supporters, including members of their family, soldiers, and poets. Many poets whose compositions are found in Sangam collection composed poems in praise of chiefs who often rewarded them with precious stones, gold, horses, elephants, chariots, and fine clothes. So we see here that when a ruler of a kingdom, he invaded a neighboring kingdom and he got a lot of tribute in return. He used to keep some of the wealth for himself and he distributed the rest among his supporters. These included the members of his family, soldiers, and poets. And as in the case of poets, we see that in the Sangam literature, many of the poets have written, poems and stories in praise of the rulers who used to give them a lot of wealth and funding. They used to give the poets, precious stones, gold, horses, elephants, lands, and so on. So the poets used to write a lot of stories and poems in praise of the king. Often they used to exaggerate the capabilities and the victories of a king quite a lot, so as to please the king more. Around 200 years later, a dynasty known as the Satavahanas became powerful in western India. The most important ruler of the Satavahanas was Gautamiputra Sri Satakarni. We know about him from an inscription composed on behalf of his mother, Gautami Bala Sri. He and the other Satavahana rulers were known as the lords of the Dakshinapatha, literally the route leading to the south, which was also used as a name for the entire southern region. He sent his army to the eastern, western, and southern coast. So, in this part, we learn about the kingdom of the Satavahanas. So, they were a powerful kingdom in western India, and their most important ruler or the famous ruler was Gautamiputra Sri Satakarni. So, as his name is based on his mother's name, his mother's name is Gautami Balashri, and naturally his name is Gautami Putra, meaning son of Gautami, Sri Satakarni. So, he was the most important ruler of the Satavahanas, and we know about him from inscription that was written on behalf of his mother, Gautami Balashri. The name of this inscription, this is, you can find it, you can search about it in internet. I think this is the Aihole inscription of Gautamiputra Sri Satakarni. You can look it up on the internet about this particular inscription. He and the other Satavahana rulers are known as the Lord of Dakshinapatha. So basically, Dakshinapatha is the route that connected North India with Southern India, and they were known as the Lords of the Dakshinapatha because they controlled the route that led to Southern India. And Dakshinapatha was also used to eventually refer to the entire southern region. So this meant that Gautamiputra or the Satavahanas as a whole, they were referred to as the lords of the Dakshinapatha, that is the route, and also the whole southern region as well. So we see here that he sent his army to the eastern, western, and southern coast. So we see that he carried out military expeditions to the eastern areas of the subcontinent, to the western parts where the western part was their main center, and he also sent expedition to the southern coast of India. The Satavahanas, I think they fought with the rulers. They fought with the Kushan rulers and the satrapies, that is the sort of, you can say, vassals of the Kushans. Nah, oh, sorry, sorry. It was the Shaka Satrapis that the that the Satavahanas fought. I think Rudra Raman was a ruler of the Shaka satraps, and these Gautamiputra and the Satavahanas, they fought against the Shaka satraps in a long conflict. So you can read about that conflict on the internet. You can look it up on the internet. And let's see the why do you think he wanted to control the coast? So we see that Gautamiputra and the Satavahanas, they wanted to control the coast because obviously for trade. Now southern coast was quite important for trading activities. A lot of wealth came from the coastal cities and ports. So naturally, the whoever controls these cities and port cities would obviously be quite rich and powerful. So the Satavahanas, they tried to control the ports. Then we come across the Silk Route and the Kushanas. Some kings tried to control large portions of the route. This was because they could benefit from taxes and gifts that were brought by traders traveling along the routes. In return, they often protected the traders who passed through their kingdoms from attacks by robbers. The best known rulers who controlled the Silk Route were the Kushanas, who ruled over Central Asia and northwestern India about 2000 years ago. Their two major centers of power were Peshawar and Mathura. Takshila was also included in their kingdom. During their rule, a branch of the Silk Route extended from Central Asia down to the seaports at the mouth of the river Indus, from where the silk was shipped westward to the Roman Empire. So, in this whole blue box, we learn about the Silk Route, and the rulers used to control the passage of trade along the Silk Route. The traders used to bring the rulers gifts and tributes, and in return, the rulers ensured that the traders are protected from robbers and thieves along the whole length of the route. So the best known rulers who controlled the Silk Route were the Kushanas. So they were, they controlled the area of the Central Asia, northwestern part of India. There are two major cities of the Kushan Empire was the Peshawar and Mathura, as we have read before, and Takshila, which was also an important city, was also included in their kingdom. So during their rule, a branch of the Silk Route extended from central India down to the mouth of the river Indus. So we see that the route from the main Silk Route, it traveled towards the south, that is towards the mouth of the river Indus, and from this area we see silk was shipped westward towards the Roman Empire. So we see that from the mouth of the river Indus, trade ships that were meant for the Roman Empire, they carried silk from China, and these silk finally reached the Roman Empire. So we see that how the ancient world was connected, and we see that China in the east, the Roman Empire in the west, and the Indian Empire, that is the Kushan Empire in the South Asia. These all were connected through the trade routes via land and also via the sea routes. So now we come at the end of the chapter. So let us see the keywords. That is iron. We see the main metal of this age. Irrigation is, the water tanks and canals that were used for betterment of agriculture. Then the port is a place from where the fishing and trading activities took place. Sangam is the groups or assembly of poets that compose the Sangam literature. Then Shreni is the association or groups of craftsperson and traders. And then we come across the Silk Route. So the trade route that went from China in the east to the Roman Empire in the west, and also part of the Silk Route, it came down the river Indus to the mouth of the river Indus. So a part passed through India as well. And then a trader is a person who is engaged in trading and merchant activities. Then we see the important dates. that is beginning of the use of iron in the subcontinent, that is around 3,000 years ago. Increased use of iron cities, punchmark coins around 2,500 years ago. We see that the use of iron and the growth of cities and punchmark coins is it increased greatly. Beginning of the composition of the Sangam literature around 2,300 years ago, and the settlement of Arika Medu was between 2,200 years ago and 1900 years ago. So we come at the end of the chapter. Let us just see the exercise. Um, Fill in the blanks. Dash was the word used for a large landowners in Tamil. So we read about these in the previous section. I think this was Villalars. Villalars was the large landowners. Let us just recheck it. Yes, we see Velalar were the large landowners. The Grama Bhojaka often got his land cultivated by the landless laborer. The landless laborer, we see. It is laborers or slaves. Plowmen were often known as in Tamil. Plowmen were known as the Urzavar. Urzavar, you can look it up and see the spelling. Urzavar, these were the plowmen. And most Grihapatis were smaller landowners. Grihapatis were smaller landowners. So describe the functions of Grama Bhojaka. Why do you think he was powerful? So we see that Grama Bhojaka, he was the village head and he was the largest landowner in the village. He also, collected the taxes from the village and functioned as a representative of the king, and also acted as the judge and policeman whenever a dispute arose in the village. List the craftsperson who have been present in both villages and cities. So in both villages and cities we see the metalsmiths were there, weavers were there, carpenters were there, the pottery makers, goldsmiths. These were all of these were there. The basket makers, all these different types of craftsmen were present in both villages and cities. And let's do the choose the correct answer. Punchmark coins were made of, I think this was tin. Punchmark coins were mainly made of tin. So we go back to the blue box and read about them. So here it is, rectangular shape at a metal sheet from the sheet, and these coins were not inspired symbols. I think yes, I think punchmark coins, these are made of mainly using tin, because ivory, I don't know, ivory coins are not made of ivory. Gold and silver was quite precious, so I think punchmark coin was used mainly with tin, and Mathura was important for a religious center. Mathura, as we saw, there were many monks, Buddhist viharas, Jain temples, and also many temples for the worship of Krishna in Mathura. Shrenis were association of craftspersons. Find out about trade and trade routes. What kind of evidence do historians find out about trade and trade routes? So for evidence, we see that different wares from distant lands, such as we read about the amphorae, the different jars and earthenwares, Roman coins and precious gems and jewelries. These were found in India, so these serve as evidence for trade and trade routes, and also the accounts of the traders and foreign travelers and sailors that we see. These also give us an idea about the different trades and trade routes. Also, there is a book, I think it's known as the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, it contains, about the information about the sea trade routes to India and the different, important trading centers along the coast of southern India. You can look it up, in the internet and find out more about it. So, oh, here are some more important dates that we missed. So let us see this. Discovery of silk around 7,000 years ago. So silk was discovered in China. The Cholas, Cheras, and Pandyas, these are the Sangam kingdoms that we saw in southern India. These are around 2,300 years ago. Growing demands of silk in the Roman Empire, it is 2000 years ago. Kanishka, the Kushan ruler, that is 1900 years ago. So the Kanishka was the important Kushan rulers, and Mathura was their important city. So a broken statue of Kanishka made in the Mathura school of architecture has also been Mathura School of Sculpture has also been found, and it is there in a museum currently. Fajian comes to India around 1600 years ago. So this is a Chinese traveler, a monk who came to India for to learn about Buddhism and collect knowledge about Buddhism. Wan Zhang comes to India, upper composes devotional poems in praise of Shiva about 1400 years ago. So this is also a Chinese traveler who came to India, and Upper is a name of an Indian poet who composed devotional poems in praise of the god Shiva. This was about 1400 years ago. So now we come at the end of the chapter. So I hope you liked the explanation and understood the chapter. If you have any doubt, you can write them in the comment section and give your suggestions as well. So please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.